show sponsors The Truth About Ag, The Wheat School, and KWS Seeds. Wanting more from your crop? KWS Hybrid Rye is bred to deliver. More yield, outperforming conventional rye by 30%, more flexibility, a versatile crop for grain forage or feed, more resilience for better soil health and sustainability, and more freedom. Less spraying, earlier harvest, and the ability to do more with the equipment you have. Visit kws.com/ca to learn how we're investing in bringing more farm success. KWS, seeding the future since 1856. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Thank you so much for making us a part of your evening. It's a big day. I hear there's some stuff going on. Anyway, maybe an election. I don't know. Let me know how it's going out there. We'll try and be far more entertaining. If anyone is interested, though, I am one of the lucky ones in one of the ridings that was a protest riding, meeting that there were 91 names on the ballot that I got to mark today. So I did take some pictures. Head on over to X if you want to see them. It's interesting. Anyway, as always for this show, if you collect those CEU credits, head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists. Let us know you took in the show and we'll get those CEU credits for you as well. And tonight's conversation, super excited for this one. We are going to talk about managing lodging and using PGRs, how we can get the most out of them, and some good tips on what to do, what not to do, what to consider, and to have that conversation. Super excited to bring in my guests. I've got with me tonight, we have Sheri Strydhorst with RDAR out of Alberta and Marijke Vanderlaan with Syngenta out of Ontario. Welcome here.
Thank you, Lyndsey.
Sheri, how you doing? Oh, there you go. Okay. Sheri, maybe on
doing excellent.
We were doing great, and now we have a delay, but that's okay. We'll manage just fine. Okay, Marijke, maybe I'll start with you. It is, of course, here we are, end of April, so I'm going to guess you were busy out in the field today. We are talking PGRs. Are we at PGR timing here in Ontario, or do we have a bit of time yet?
We are. This is the perfect timing to talk about this for Ontario. So excited to just be in the thick of it. And I think some PGRs I'm sure have been applied, but we're kind of right at the beginning of the window for a lot of Southern Ontario.
Okay. So we are going to talk about what that window looks like. So how much time do we have, not have, and why that window even matters. Marijke, before I go to Sheri, because I want Sheri to tell us what she does at RDAR as well and some of the cool work that RDAR is doing. But what do you do for Syngenta? What keeps you busy?
Yeah, so actually I wasn't in the field this morning because our students started today. So a bunch of bright, young, amazing, like super excited for, I don't know, the interns that we all get to work with. I mean, they are a smart bunch. Oh my goodness, we played Jeopardy today. And they were answering questions, that I did not know the answer to. So, yes, it was, it was pretty incredible. So excited to work with bright, young, motivated people this summer. So that was my morning. And then I got out into the field this afternoon. Spent the afternoon in some wheat fields. So.
Okay. It is the season, I guess, for all those summer students.
Yes, and I didn't actually say, what do I do? I just got really excited about our students. But so I get to wear the agronomist hat for Syngenta on the crop protection side and work with all our reps across Ontario. So we have a great team, and I get to support them with the technical side of things. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay. Jason Vogt out of Manitoba shares that his summer student started today. For mine here at the farm as well. Super excited. So big day for all us grown-ups with our summer students. All right, Sheri, we've got you back. We've got a feed now. Tell us, share a bit about what you do with RDAR, the kind of work that the kind of research you're doing with RDAR.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the research program manager for crops. So RDAR, it does make investments in researchers and I kind of pulled the list of projects that we're investing in plant growth regulators for tonight's conversation. But in my previous life, when I was with Alberta Agriculture, I did a whole bunch of work with very applied cereal agronomic research and worked with plant growth regulators in wheat and barley crops, a little bit in oats, just as they were becoming registered and options for growers. And, you guys are talking about wheat being at PGR staging, and, we have a lot more spring wheat out here in Western Canada. So tonight, after this session, I'm going to be running out to pick up my husband at the field because the seed is going out to the field, and tomorrow the spring wheat planting will get started on our farm. So we're a little bit delayed from the PGR application window here for our spring wheat, but there's definitely things I'm seeing out there that I think growers need to be thinking about even at this time of year when they're planning for PGR application in the upcoming month or 6 weeks kind of thing.
Absolutely. And it is good timing because, as Marijke says, we're right on time for Ontario. And Sheri, your growers in Western Canada are going to be well prepared for the timing when it does eventually arrive. And one thing that's really neat, and we are going to touch on that tonight, Sheri, of course, works in Alberta and works with some irrigation acres as well. So that's not super common for a lot of us, and some really cool things to learn from irrigated production as well. Mark's kicking us off with actually one of the places we do really need to talk about. So before we get to the question of temperature, because when we apply this product is really important, the conditions with which we apply this product is really important. But I want to back up just a half step of the why of using this product. So yes, it's a lodging tool, but it's a bigger conversation than just that. But Marijke, when you're sort of going through the why we would use this, why is trying to keep that crop standing so very important?
Yeah, so keeping it standing, of course, from a yield standpoint, they kind of say for every day it lodges after it flowers, pollinates, starts grain filling, we can lose a bushel per day. Typically, obviously, it's not going to lodge right after pollination. We need there to be weight in those heads, but keeping it standing so that we can have a pleasant harvest experience. I heard a grower once say, I don't want to, turn a perfectly beautiful July day into a terrible day because my wheat's fallen. So yield is one, and harvestability for sure is a big one. And another one that I never really thought about too much was actually the impact on FHB, on Fusarium head blight. When it does lodge, then our disease pressure and toxin production can increase. So that's maybe even more important for some of the areas in the West. We haven't had FHB and Fusarium in Ontario for a number of years now in a significant way in grower fields. But yeah, those are some of the reasons that come to mind for me.
You should hang out in Manitoba. There's plenty there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Sheri, one of the other things I think about is quality loss potentially. In a lodged crop, we've touched on Fusarium head blight, but what risks do we run if we've got a crop that's laying down on the quality side?
I think certainly, when you get those rains at harvest, which we certainly can have, when your head is laying on the soil surface or not far from it, and you got this humidity and heads in the wet, that is a perfect condition for accelerating that sprouting condition, which no one wants to have issues with your falling numbers and things like that. And just those secondary infections that come by having that head in a wet soil when those seeds are ready to harvest is going to drop your quality. And you don't want to go from a number one to a feed if you can prevent that.
Yeah. And it does, we are talking about, of course, the winter wheat crop in Ontario, very much a spring crop in the West. And so when we harvest these crops, there is there's a difference between these two. But I'm just trying to think about, when we're trying to get wheat off here in Ontario, those big rainstorms come through and just absolutely drench things. So yes, we can get into a cold, wet harvest season out west, but we can certainly get some of those big deluges in those summer storms at times here in Ontario as well. So all bad when the head is either on the ground or close to the ground. So okay, so let's then talk a little bit about staging. And yes, we will talk about what to consider on the application window. Sheri, I'm glad you're here because we will touch on barley and oats as well, not just wheat. So if you've got anyone in the comments, if you've got questions, pop them in there for sure. But Marijke, there, as you said, we're in the window, approaching the window. How wide is the window to apply these products? What happens if I wait too long? What are my trade-offs here?
Right. So, yeah, the window is quite wide. However, we always recommend the optimal window is 30 to 32, and that's basically because we're getting that peak in the gibberellin hormone, which we're suppressing with something like Modus and Manipulator in that window. Also in that window or at that time, that's where we want more strengthening to occur. If we apply it later, we still get some potentially shortening and strengthening of the stem, but it's higher up in the plant. And where lodging is occurring is closer to the base. So if we can get the strength there, we're going to get more out of the product. So we're going to get a better return if we have that lodging risk. And so there's also split applications on labels for some crops. And so the first application could happen before 30, but we find with Modus specifically, in most situations, especially the winter wheat crop here in Ontario, 30 is the beginning, 32 is the end of that optimal. And you can go all the way up to flag leaf, but again,
Right.
not going to get the same value. Still going to give you some value, but not the same as in that optimal window.
So okay, and Sheri, we've actually got a label that we can sort of compare Modus and Manipulator. So producer Jay, if you would, I want to say it's slide 3. Try 3. Is this the right one? There we go. Yes. Okay, this is Modus.
Let's go with this one. Sure.
Yeah,
This is
we'll start here. So
yeah,
so
this
walk
is
us
Modus,
through.
and
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, so, and I'm going to specifically focus on the barley part of the label for Modus, and then we'll look at staging on Manipulator for wheat. And you can see, so it is divided. The top part of this chart here, where I've got the yellow, is for a single application. So the nice thing about these, I'm going to call them the newer to the market gibberellin biosynthesis inhibitors, have a really nice window for application. We'll touch upon ethyl, and it's got a tight, tiny, scary window. So here, you've got growth stage 30 to 39. So what that looks like is when you are almost like that end of herbicide, when you're starting to see that plant go upright to that flag leaf timing. But as was said, the ideal or the optimal window there is at growth stage 30 to 32, and you don't want to apply it past growth stage 39. If you are planning to do a split application where it is lower rates at the early and late, for barley with Modus is that BBCH 21 to 24, so a main shoot and up to 4 tillers. And then the second, so that's kind of, think of that maybe as your herbicide timing. And the second application would be a very early flag leaf fungicide application timing, that growth stage 37 to 39. So I think there's, everyone sees the optimum is at 30 to 32, but that means a separate pass because there isn't really another product you're tank mixing with there. And then when you do that split application, that's where you can maybe piggyback and get that in with your herbicide and then with an early flag leaf fungicide timing. So there's some reasonings there to do that a little bit differently. But again, and I think there's a diagram with the flag or the fishing pole there of why that 30 to 32 is important. One thing we have to remember about PGRs is that they never reverse growth. They only prevent future growth from happening and future elongation from happening. So it doesn't, turn back the time. There's no fountain of youth here. It's only from the time it's applied to that point forward.
Right. So, okay. So, and we can look at Manipulator here as well, but, and I do want to talk about some of the cautions, but and barley is maybe one of the ones I think of because it certainly does lie flat, but goodness, we've seen a lot of wheat go down in Ontario the last few years. When is there a case for that split application, Marijke? I'll maybe ask you first. Is that on something that's, maybe has way too much nitrogen, or there was a screw up on the seeding rate, or like, is there a significant advantage to doing a split rate?
Yeah, I still find, I mean, the majority of my experience has been with winter wheat in Ontario, of course. And
Right.
I find that on the winter wheat label, we only have one application actually in Canada. So it really is that 30 to 32 window. I think where a split application could make sense is if I guess if you're maybe concerned about stress, how
Right.
much of the product do you really need, and maybe kind of managing from an insurance sort of standpoint. Um, and growth regulators are kind of unique in that sense that, with a herbicide, if we get the wrong rate on, that's a problem from a resistance standpoint. A little bit different here. Of course, we have labels we need to follow. But yeah, I still, for the most part, I would recommend that single application. I know in the West there's been more split apps with oats, just with
Okay.
oats being a very sensitive cereal. Of all the cereals, oats is the one that is the most sensitive. And that's where some more split applications have been used and kind of monitoring weather and seeing how much of that PGR that you need.
Hmm. So Sheri, in going through this,
Maybe I can
then,
weigh in too.
yeah, if you could, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I think like right now what I'm seeing in my part of the world, it's really dry. There is concerns about drought and you do not need or want to put a PGR on when Mother Nature is going to be your PGR. So
Okay.
if you are going into your herbicide timing and we're looking at drought, don't put a PGR on. Like, do not.
Yeah.
If you get to flag leaf timing and we have seen significant rains come, yield potential of that crop has increased, that's when you might think about that later window. So, as it was said, it's that opportunity to spread out your risk and make a decision about a PGR as you know what the growing season is giving you. So, I think even if we just roll it back just a little bit further about should you use a PGR or not,
Right.
particularly in the spring wheat context, if you're in a growing region where the yield potential of your wheat is 30 to 40 bushels, this is not the product for you. This is something where we have really high rainfall, high fertility. So when you're in that 80, 90, 100 plus bushel type of growing season, that's when you should be having these conversations and thinking about this. But of course, we don't know what our growing season is going to bring us. So that's where, you can maybe do a split and delay it, just to manage your crop safety and also financial risk.
Hmm. Sheri, when you say that Mother Nature may be the PGR, in those drought years, in seeing some of that drought, I mean, I've seen a few inches tall of a plant putting out a head. Like, it is quite amazing. I mean, it's sad, but it's also just remarkable that that plant will still put up a head and still try very hard to reproduce and make seeds. But it is quite amazing that under drought conditions, just how short and stunted those plants could be. So really quite fascinating for sure. Okay, so I want to touch on definitely temperature and, as you said, stress as well. But producer Jay, let's go, because Marijke does also have, there is that one slide of the fishing pole as well. But I actually want to go to our clip first. So we'll go to our clip, our first clip with that talks about the early versus late timing this wheat school. And then when we come back, we can talk a bit more about that. But then I really do want to talk about temperature and tank mixing, etc. And we've got some great questions coming in, so we'll tackle those too. So producer Jay, if you would, we'll go to our first clip.
So let's walk back here and we'll just have a look at where we didn't treat it. And so this is the untreated, and what do you see in Mike?
Well, it's probably about 8 inches taller for one thing. Like it does have that wave when the wind blows through it, and it's just I suspect it'll be, by harvest time, we'll be picking it off the ground.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. And
yeah.
so this is Pro 81, and it's an excellent hard wheat variety. It's got excellent yield potential, right? It's a
Yep.
variety that you think you should be able to push the nitrogen rates.
That's right, yeah.
Really manage it.
Yep.
But we don't want it to fall over.
That's right. It's one of our hard reds too, right? So pushing nitrogen is key to get that quality.
Yeah.
So in order to keep it standing, we suggest a Modus application.
Yeah, or a growth regulator. And when you do this, like, it really is amazing the difference in how that feels, right? It just is quite surprising from that standpoint. So last point, Mike, when did you apply this growth regulator? Does it make a difference when you apply? Give us a little bit of insight there.
Okay, so yeah, we applied it a little later. We had about eight days of cool weather, and I just wanted to be a little bit safe. It was applied growth stage 39, so a little bit later than the recommended time. So, but the effect is quite visual, right?
Quite dramatic, yes.
Right, very dramatic. Yep. So.
So at growth stage 39, where would you expect to see that stem elongation? Where would we have the impact?
So the later you apply it, the higher up it's going. It shrinks,
right.
I guess. Right?
So it's going to be the upper nodes or the upper internodes that are getting shortened. That's more right, so than the lower.
The lower end, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why, if we could, right, we'd apply at growth stage 30, 31, because as they talk about the fishing pole, we get that thicker base, and we're not quite as worried about this up here, but it still works. Like, I'm astounded at how much impact you've had, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
The Agronomists is brought to you by KWS Seeds, The Truth About Ag, and the Wheat School. From varietal advancements, protein and yield management, precision farming, and on to marketing, Real Agriculture's Wheat School is a video series that tackles every facet of the wheat growing season in an engaging and informative format. The Wheat School is made possible through C&M Seeds and Bayer Crop Science. Learn more at wheatschool.com. It's just me dancing. That's fine. I do it every time. Okay, so to bring home sort of this concept of when we apply these PGRs and what they actually do in the plant, I do like this fishing pole, and I think Pete, who I haven't seen in the chat yet, so if anybody has any gossip about him, now's the time. But Pete, references this fishing pole, right? So strong at the base, so we've got a lot of flex. So Marijke, this is your slide. Just walk us through quickly sort of what the thought process is here on early versus late.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about this, a little bit already, but essentially when you're applying it, if you're applying it growth stage 30 to 32, that strength is coming in the base of the plant. And the strength can be either getting a height reduction, but we don't always see a height reduction depending on the variety, or that thickening of the stem, which can be hard to sometimes even see with the naked eye. Sometimes you can see that, but so that's what we're getting, and that, optimal window timing. And then when we're going later, I mean, our winter wheat basically goes from growth stage 32 to 37. So when we're pushing that 37 window, the flag leaf emerging, then we'll get that strengthening higher up of the plant. I think too, I don't know if we'll get talking about this, but there are differences between varieties and their sort of sensitivity to PGRs. And so in the video, Pro 81 is quite responsive. Like, I've seen, 10 inches of height reduction. Wow. And so if you are going later, you are potentially sometimes impacting that peduncle, that stem, and sometimes we're not seeing that head, or we're seeing the head just clear that flag leaf ligule. So that's something to be mindful of as well when we do go in that later window.
Mm-hmm. We do not need heads caught in the boot.
No,
we need them to clear, so that we can protect them as well. Okay, and Phil Needham's got a great question here coming in that consistency question. So Sheri, similar question though on the trying to determine, when we use PGRs. As Marijke says, there's a variety a response that we can't always count on in the same way every year. But we do have to think about the stress the plant is already under as well. So one of the questions here is nighttime temperatures. Do we need to worry about cool nights? Sheri, how do you handle the, when is a no-go and when is a drive on as far as what weather conditions are like?
Yeah, I think there's many different buckets of weather we have to worry about. So the first one is that cool night. So very often in Western Canada, it can be growth stage 30 to 32, and we get that 0, -1 overnight. Don't be pulling your sprayer out that morning at 6 o'clock. I would say leave 2-3 days. That plant is under stress if it just dealt with a freezing condition. And that's what is beautiful about these gibberellin PGR inhibitors, is that they do have flexibility on the window, that you can wait 2-3 days to give that plant the chance to recover. So really stay away, because we do have those cold nights, or if you've got low fields where you might have that cooling and possibly freezing at that lower elevation, stay away. I'm a very risk warning, be cautious about your PGRs. Do not do this and cause more harm than good. So hang tight there. I know it's tough, but occupy yourself with something else. Mm-hmm. And then I guess there is the heat part of things and the drought part of things. And I don't know if we want to just stick to the cold temperatures right now, but for that.
No, I think that's actually a really good point.
Is that on the cold?
Yeah. Is there such thing as too hot though? Like, do these products work best in a certain window?
Yes. Yeah. So again, any type of stress that your crop is under, you don't want to mix that with your PGR application. So, when we are seeing in Alberta, I'll say, the 30 degrees during the day, the really low humidity. Again, these are very reflective of that drought kind of condition, and they are not conducive for the PGR application. So I, again, recommend stay, a number of days away from that stress and let your plant recover. And if you continue to have that heat stress, again, Mother Nature is giving you the signal that she's going to be your PGR, and just back off. This isn't like missing a herbicide application where you're going to do irreparable damage to your field. This can be a day by day kind of decision making. And I know everyone likes to pencil everything out and have the plan, but I do think PGRs need a little bit more of that last minute decision making.
Mm-hmm. Mother Nature is my PGR would make a great bumper sticker, Marijke. So you're welcome. You can have that one. I like that a lot. Okay, yeah. So on that question though, because we are just this week, there are some growers who are tackling with exactly this question. And so like if it were several nights in a row of say around 0, I could totally see where that becomes an easier out, right? But if it's just one blip out of 3 or 4 good days, I think waiting does feel prudent, but what if it's going to rain? Like, do I roll the dice? What do I do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a little bit of it is, kind of that gut agronomist feeling of just knowing, is this a stress on my wheat or not? Like how much, for how long is that stress can be on that plant and can it recover? As an example, like if we got frost last night and a grower went to apply their PGR this evening and the daytime temperature tomorrow is great too, I would be comfortable with that. Less comfortable with a frost right after you apply. Like what that wheat crop is or cereal crop is going to experience after the PGR application is more critical to be concerned about, in my opinion. But we generally like this rule of 3. Typically, I mean, for us, a PGR is not going down on its own. It's going with other products. And so rule of 3, above 3 degrees Celsius as your low the day before, the day of, and the day after. that's kind of our ideal. Did Lyndsey freeze for you as well, Sheri?
Yeah, she actually does look frozen.
Okay, it's not just me. Okay, it's our show now, Sheri. All right. So yeah,
We're running it.
I guess a little bit more than on the temperature piece. Just I see a few growers in the chat from Ontario. We are going to have a really warm day tomorrow. Feels like 30 degrees. I think it's going to get in the Guelph area a high of 24, 25. And then the nighttime temperature tomorrow night is supposed to drop to 0 degrees. Feels like -5. So it's like, what are growers supposed to do with that? Like that's a big temperature swing for a cereal crop to go through. But my gut is telling me it's brief enough. Yes, it's going to be hot tomorrow, but we have soil moisture here. It's not that our wheat crop is stressed from a moisture standpoint. And so, I feel comfortable with growers that have, say, applied the PGR today, that I think it is going to be okay. But I agree with you, Sheri, about PGRs. They're a tool that need to be respected. They're not for every acre, for every situation. But I think, for the most part, when I look at the window of the next 14 days of what I can see on the weather network, we will have that window to get the job done. But I know growers, they've been texting me too. Sometimes logistics trumps agronomy.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. And I'm back, everybody. I'll blame the elections. Elections Canada website apparently was down, so maybe I'm connected somehow. I don't know. Anyway, so it's a very good question about the temperature, and one of those of like the logistics side of it as well, and just how wide that window is and just how much impact we have. There was a question, and actually now that I've gone and come back, I've lost some of them, but there was a question about straw that I do want to address a little later. First, though, I want to get to Phil Needham's question, which was asking about consistency in a response. So I think one of the key things with PGRs, as the two of you have outlined very well, is that these are a tool, but we have to be judicious in when we choose to use them. They're not perfect, but there are varieties that are going to react differently. Some really well, some maybe less so. Marijke, do you have experience in what might go into what designates a response or a non-response?
Yeah, I think we often get some response. Is it always visible to our naked eye, in terms of that height reduction? If variety tends to be shorter to begin with, you're not going to see as big of a response. What makes a Pro 81 respond so much versus, another variety that tends to be on the shorter end, not respond as much? I don't know the intricacies, of that. Is that, maybe Sheri has comments on this, but do these varieties produce different levels of that gibberellin hormone? And I think to Phil Needham's question, I mean, we're using a growth regulator, when Mother Nature is also regulating growth. And so every year, even if it's the same variety, and we're targeting that same timing, temperatures are going to be different. We're going to get potentially different amount of uptake, and how that plant metabolizes the active, how quickly it does. So really, it is that environmental interaction which is regulating hormones in the plant, and we're adding a tool that is regulating hormones in the plant. And so that is very hard to predict and see that potential consistency. But I have also seen the ranges, on the same variety one year from another, and how different it can be. Yeah.
Okay. Jason's got a great
Yeah,
question.
and I can weigh in on that.
Oh, yeah.
quickly.
Okay. Could you? Yes. Could you, Sheri? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. And, I think from what I saw back in my day when we were looking at different varieties with Modus and Manipulator, it definitely was that manipulator tended to shorten more than a modus. But I think people get very wrapped up in, if I don't see a height reduction, then there's not going to be a lodging or a standability improvement. And those, let's try and dissociate those, because they are not always tied hand in hand. The beautiful combination where I think we see really nice reductions more frequently, I'm not going to say always, is that AAC Brandon hard red spring wheat with a manipulator. We see quite consistent, nice shortening with that. But there's other varieties that come out of the same breeding program where, 2 out of 3 times we'll see it shorten, other times we won't. And we don't understand it. These systems of the hormones in the plants are incredibly complicated. They vary with the cultivar, and we don't have a secret decoder ring that tells us this equals that. So again, and I think one of the things about height reduction is, in my part of the world, we got too much straw in these big yielding crops. So you're also hoping for some of that height reduction to manage the amount of residue that you are producing as well. And the one sweet combination I have seen most consistently, not always again, is that manipulator and that Brandon wheat have worked quite nicely to achieve that.
Yeah. So fascinating that, certainly there seems to be some varieties that, show that response, but even within some of that, there can be obviously a difference year by year. Now, really great question from Jason we did talk a bit about temperature. One of the other questions that often comes up is a PGR pass a pass in and of itself, or can I tank mix? And if so, what? So now I recognize that the easiest answer is going to be it depends, but maybe let's stick with some of the absolutely no-goes or reasons for them, and then maybe some of the things that might work. So Marijke, when you're out there, what are some of the common things that might go in a tank together that have worked out okay?
Yeah, I mean, most common would be fungicide, herbicide, PGR. That does happen a lot on the winter wheat crop because we have this window. We want to get the wheat crop sprayed before we switch over to corn. And so oftentimes it does all happen at once. There is more herbicide applications happening in the fall, which is great. So we can maybe push a little bit later into that 31, 32 window, and you're going to get more out of the fungicide then. So I do like that. But if you're doing the herbicide, you do want to get that done as soon as you can. And so I've seen that work well, and that's where that rule of 3 is really important, that we are applying that mixture when the crop is not stressed. Because when we put multiple things in the tank, like herbicide, fungicide, plant growth regulator, there is surfactant built into each formulation. Some of the herbicides would be dry products, and then it requires the addition of a non-ionic surfactant. But generally, think about these products all have surfactant in them, and that's what can cause that burn. And so in Ontario, a lot of our farmers are very familiar with then going to 20 gallons per acre of water to dilute that surfactant. And that, again, works really well when our temperatures are favorable to get that done.
Mm-hmm. Sheri, does that look different in the West, just with timing?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot of experience or comfort about talking about the tank mixes, but we did do some research where we put the fungicide in at that growth stage 30-32, and we weren't seeing the fungicide efficacy in our environment. And we want to also not just throw something else in the tank because you're going over the field. Make sure that your pass is achieving what your ultimate goal is. And if you think that harvesting a flat quarter section of wheat is a nightmare, then do it at the right time and do that separate pass at the optimum stage. And think of what it's going to save you in the fall rather than the stress it's causing you at that time when there's herbicide to be done and everything else is competing. But it often is something that, to get the most out of your investment, you need to do it at the sole timing for just that product, at least in our environment.
Marijke,
And
what
there's
about
always what ifs, but
yes, and again, I'm sure there's always somebody who's tried something that they wish they hadn't. So please, anyone, if you'd like to share those things, I think that's important. Marijke, what about fertilizer? Is that an approved tank mix? Is that one of those you got to try it, or is that a no go?
It's a no-go if you're putting on obviously like your 28% or something like, because you're not applying that with the right nozzle. So different kind of uses there. But I have played with some like foliars just
Right?
to try to heat things up and see if I could actually cause burn. It was a trial. I was looking at this Megafol product that Mark has asked a little bit about, to see if
Yeah.
a Megafol, a biostimulant, could kind of safen things.
Right.
I threw everything I felt like I had a 5-way tank mix and did 2x the rate of everything and did 10 gallons. And I thought for sure I'm getting burn, and I didn't get burn. So I'm still chasing that burn in some ways and seeing how
Right.
we can reduce that. But so I have played with that a little bit, and that seemed to be fine. But it's not a common practice to put a
No.
foliar on it,
Yeah.
P1. So yeah.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, again, we're talking about a spring crop and a winter crop, so the
Yeah.
timing of some of these things is going to vary depending on where you are for
Yeah.
what stage, and of course what growing season you have, right? Because we've had times where we're probably past what we should be for the weed control window, but maybe we couldn't get in when we wanted to, and maybe we still do need to do a herbicide pass. So yes. Jason says, just send it, Marijke. Just send it. Yeah, exactly. Okay, now Gore's got a good question about split nitrogen application. So along this line, where does a PGR potentially fit in a split nitrogen program?
Yeah, so if you did split your nitrogen program, then you are reducing your risk of lodging by spreading out that nitrogen application. So that does reduce things, but I would still basically look at what are you feeding the crop for, like what yields are you after, or your soil, your area is capable of, kind of that total nitrogen in the program, what was going on the year before, how much kind of residual N is there, what do you expect for mineralization? Because really, I've seen wheat fields that have had split N apps fall over too. So yes, I would still recommend a PGR if you are going for that, high yielding crop. And I mean, in Ontario, I would say that's over 100 bushels. If you're splitting, I mean, growers are getting often 120, 130 bushels in the winter wheat crop. So that's still an environment likely that a PGR is going to bring value. And one thing we didn't really talk about earlier is it's not all about lodging. That certainly is the main focus of a PGR. But I know there are growers that are using a PGR because they are reducing some of the volume still going through the
Right.
combine. And so they're seeing the value from a harvest efficiency standpoint.
Right.
So if you're dialed in on the depreciation of your combine and how many, by the hour, then that might even be a reason that they're putting a PGR, and maybe then the lower rate is something they might do.
Sheri, the question of straw comes up quite often about, are you reducing if you're getting a height reduction, are you actually reducing the straw? But maybe that is what you want to be doing. How do you tackle the straw question when it comes to integrating PGRs into your agronomic portfolio?
I guess I would say don't count on a guaranteed height reduction. If you get it, wonderful. But I think what the PGR does, if you've achieve that standability and you're able to cut at a higher cutter bar height, so you're not having to scrape the ground, that's putting potentially like a third less crop through the combine, and then that's there standing, catching snow for sequestering moisture for the upcoming year. So it is, there's a lot to that. And anytime, harvest ease, but keeping that straw so that you're not getting so much trash that you're trying to direct seed into the following spring is really an important aspect there.
Mm-hmm. I think that as both of you have outlined, the harvest considerations sometimes maybe aren't as apparent at the time because we're talking about when the crop is really little, but goodness doesn't make a difference at harvest, whether that crop is standing upright or, Sheri, as you said, that standability that you might be able to be more efficient across the field. And what is it, Marijke? It's the MOG, material other than grain. If you can decrease your MOG, you're more efficient. There you go. I love that term. So anytime I can work it in, I'm going to do that. All right. Let's have our last read of the night, Producer Jay. And then I do want to touch on a few other things, including, of course, do we have any pre-harvest discussions or any of those MRL things that we need to think about? So Producer Jay, if you would. The Agronomist is brought to you by the Wheat School, KWS Seeds, and The Truth About Ag. The Truth About Ag podcast is produced by Evan Shout and Christian Hebert of Farmer Coach and Hebert Grain Ventures. It aims to bring you closer to the heartbeat of agriculture through candid conversations and honest discussions. Find episodes wherever you get your podcasts, including realagriculture.com and the Real Ag podcast feed. Farmer Schneck, thank you. He hates MOG. I like the word MOG. I didn't say liked MOG. So there you go. Okay, so Sheri, there's a really important part to this entire conversation. In the West, of course, we talk more about wheat, barley, and oats, and this decision to use PGRs. Ontario, we have a hard enough time growing wheat, so there's hardly any barley or oats. There are some, but not many. But Sheri, what do we need to know about? And I think we've got a couple slides we can also look at when it comes to the use of these products and the marketing of the eventual grain crop.
Yeah, if we can pull up that slide on the keep it clean there, particularly with barley, there are marketing considerations. So you can see here, I just stole this off the Keep It Clean website. So with chlorbaquat, so that is the active ingredient and manipulator, do talk to who you plan to sell this to about the use on both feed or food and malt barley. So, just because you're growing barley for the feed market, if that is being exported, you need to have that conversation before you spray it because you don't want to limit your marketing opportunities. So again, this is just a caution that give that quick call to who you intend to sell to and make sure it is acceptable to spray a product like a manipulator on your barley. So I just wanted that warning out because no one wants to get to that declaration stage and go, oof, now I've just closed a marketing window.
That's right. Yeah. No, really, really good point. And glad you brought it up. I did want to, before we go to, there's a couple other questions on crop maturity that I want to get to. But along the same lines, you did mention ethyl, which is not etheridge. It's ethyl, an older product, Sheri, still used at times on the irrigation acres. How is that product different? What do we need to know different about ethyl versus modus and manipulator?
Yeah, so thanks for pulling up the label here. The staging window here is tight. Definitely, and this is maybe one of the drawbacks of this older product. So you've got growth stage 37 when that flag leaf is tight and rolled. Until you've got the awns just poking out of the head, and you can't have more than 10% of the awns emerged. So really, really careful staging. I've had irrigated growers who will tell me they will go and spray the higher elevation parts of their field and come back 24 hours later to do the lower parts to get this staging right. So when you hear that someone's willing to do that, you go, wow, staging is like it gives me goosebumps how scared I am of this product. but it also, before we had the manipulator and the Modus on the market, this was the product of choice, and it can do some great things. But I also get incredibly frustrated when I get the phone call, oh, I'm planning to spray ethereal, and I've got a couple of heads with the awns poking out, and I don't have the product, and it's windy, and I'm getting a contract guy. Please don't. Just this, if you're using an ethereal, you have to plan ahead, and the way to just take 10 plants, do that count, and do it at multiple stages across the field, and consider elevation stage or changes to across the field, because there's not a lot of perfectly even uniform fields out there. So again, just a word of caution there.
Even under irrigation, there's variability. So even when you can literally make it rain, everybody, it still happens because the soil's different. Elevation's different. Okay, so really good point, and also I think it speaks to probably why we have these newer products that have that wider window, because it does give us that flexibility, certainly. Now, so Jason out of Manitoba, great question, and Marijke, I think you and I have talked about this before. Does using a PGR change maturity dates at all?
Yes, I would say the answer is I have seen it often give us a day or two longer grain fill, and that we'll see that then on the harvest end of things. I mean, speaking for Modus specifically, we'll sometimes see greener plants. Like you'll see that early on that there's a line in the field, and like, why is there a line in the field? Is that because it's a little bit shorter? What's going on there? But there is oftentimes, I think, a little bit of a greenness there, and yeah, a bit of delay. But I believe they say for every day longer in grain fill, we can get about 3 bushels in the winter wheat crop. And we do see with growth regulators, they can impact, of course, the plant and the energy being put into the roots. So there's some data out of Europe mainly showing impact on the roots. So if we are getting a bigger root system, that can help us over the season, over the growing season, right? Just impact just water uptake, nutrient uptake, and so on. So I think there's a few things going on there, but we do still see that yield gain in the absence of lodging, and I think that's where that comes from.
Sheri, what do we see something similar for the West, and is it a benefit or does it cause any issues?
Yeah, no, we certainly quite often observe that greenness, that later maturity, maybe 3 days kind of thing. So I think when a grower is thinking about which fields they are putting their PGR on, if you've got a field where you didn't get it seeded until, of course, this is Western Canada, till the late May, you better be really mindful of putting a PGR on something that you're going to push, 3 days later, potentially. So it would be, again, not necessarily every field is suitable, and just consider what other stresses. We have seen also reduced kernel weight or grain weights quite frequently with this. So it could be so a smaller 1,000 kernel weight could be associated with that. So that doesn't necessarily mean a reduced yield. Right. There's been some work out of the University of Manitoba where there's actually more kernels, but they're smaller kernels. So it's you do one thing with hormones, and the ripple effects are we don't even know always where to look for the ripples because there's so many effects.
Mm-hmm. So cool. It's kind of neat to think about, if it's really you're just making the straw thicker, you think big deal, but it's what you're doing and what you're impacting to cause potentially shorter straw or thicker straw. It has, I love that, a ripple effect. Pretty cool. That is super neat. I really enjoy that. Okay. A few last things. And actually it was Marijke's first slide and you think we would have mentioned it, but we didn't. So we've talked a bit about, what this product can do or why we want to do it. But it sounds to me anyway, there's definitely going to be a time where you kind of have to make the call on whether it's worth it or not. And so the question, and so producer Jay, if you could go, I think it's Marijke's slide 1, the stems per square foot. So can I make a decision based on my crop in the spring. What does this chart tell me?
Yeah, so I like this chart from C&M Seeds just as a tool where you can go in and look at how many stems per plant, how many plants per foot of row. But what I like is we kind of see the sweet spot, and anything above that is putting us into that risk category. So I like going in and, okay, how many total stems do I have per square foot? And if you're in that kind of 65, 70 plus, you're in this risk area. And then you're thinking about, okay, what variety am I growing? Is it more prone to lodging? How much total nitrogen am I, putting on this crop? What yield am I feeding this crop for and managing this crop for? And we didn't even talk about the yen. I got to throw out just a
I
shout out to
know.
the yield enhancement network, because that's been such a fun project that I've been part of here. Is that biomass is the number one piece that correlates with high yield. So if you have big biomass, a lot of stems per square foot, it is a really good indication of a high yielding crop, of course, something that is worth feeding and protecting with that PGR.
Mm-hmm. Sheri, how does that translate on the western side? Because it's been eye-opening for me coming to Ontario that all these tillers make heads and all these heads make grain. Because in Western Canada, we get a whole bunch of tillers that we're like, yeah, just ignore those. They're not going to make seeds. So how do we use sort of this same concept, but apply it to Western Canada? Oh, are you muted, Sheri?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so
Carry on.
I look at this figure and go 7.5 inch row spacing. I go, what drill is that? So I'm struggling to get past that on this, but I think often maybe just the comment on plant stand is that the more plants that you have per foot of row, per meter of row, the stems do tend to be thinner. So in Western Canada, we're not targeting a whole bunch of tillers because, if they're not there by June, forget it. They are a liability to our crop, because now what do we do with these late green tillers? We're talking glyphosate nightmare issues. So as we increase our seeding rates, we do tend to get thinner stems, and then those are weaker stems. And then we start getting into the situation where at a higher seeding rate, you might incite the need for a PGR more. And we're actually funding a project with RDAR on oats that if you move from 300 to 350 plants per meter squared, do you actually increase shattering, and how does the PGR fit into all of that? So a lot of unanswered questions on that front, but it's definitely quite different from East to Western Canada on that particular topic.
But a very cool project as well. Also, hats off to C&M for hit the sweet spot on this. Yeah, although it makes me want to say sweat, but that's not right. It's sweet. Got it. Okay. Mark has a question about using a PGR. Does Modus work on corn or any PGR for that matter? Mark, I thought the whole point of having corn was making sure it got to be 12 to 15 feet high, just so you could say it was that tall, even if it's not for silage. Marijke, any words of encouragement for someone who wants short corn? I know there's short corn being bred, but
yes.
Yeah.
We get the question quite a bit, actually. But yeah, it would work on corn, but not a good idea from a yield standpoint. So don't try this at home. Yeah.
Do not try this. That is okay. See, for everyone watching, if that's your one take-home message, it was worth it. Okay, so don't do it unless you're trying to prove a point, or maybe you do it to your neighbor, and because they keep eating you in the yield trials, maybe. I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying maybe you do. Anyway, okay, we are out of time. I feel like we covered a lot, but not all of it. So any questions, of course, send them in. But this was incredibly informative. I learned a lot, some really neat stuff here. So Sheri and Marijke, thank you so much for joining me. I know you probably would rather be at, any sort of rally or something. Absolutely not. But I've been getting some texts, and the outcome doesn't look as sure as everyone was saying. So dun, dun, dun. Stay tuned. Okay. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us here on The Agronomist. Thank you to my guests, of course, and thank you to all of you in the comments, asking your questions, and in the chat. Next week, it is the first week of May, so we are going to talk about rejuvenating pastures and hayfields, because I get my one forage episode a year, and it will be next week. So everyone join me 8 p.m. Eastern for that. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and let's find out who our new Prime Minister is. Cheers, everybody.